Kevin Stefanski's firing should have been the headline, but Jason Lloyd hijacked the story. Just as the Browns were reeling from leadership loss, Lloyd chose that moment to suggest they ship out their defensive anchor, Myles Garrett. It was a move many saw as tone-deaf, especially considering Garrett's monumental season, which included a jaw-dropping 7-sack performance and top defensive grades across the board. Instead of focusing on the organizational chaos, if you're into the real story and all the messy twists they don't show on highlight reels, go ahead and subscribe. And if you're sticking around to see how this Browns QB chaos plays out, you should definitely be subscribed. Lloyd shifted attention to a bizarre proposal that many fans and analysts are calling out as both irrational and racially tinged. The numbers make the argument simple. Garrett is irreplaceable. At a time when the Browns need stability and leadership, he provides both, and then some. Trading him for draft picks isn't forward-thinking. It's self-sabotage. The smarter play is to protect what's working, not gamble it away under the guise of rebuilding. Jason Lloyd really thought he was doing something when he said the Cleveland Browns should trade Myles Garrett. That's not a joke. That's not a misquote. He looked at a player who just finished one of the most dominant individual seasons in NFL history, led the league in sacks, quarterback pressures, and hits, recorded a 7-sack game, and the solution, after Kevin Stefanski was fired, was to cash Garrett in for some draft picks. No nuance, no hesitation, just a flat-out trade him. And for what? Better players. That was the reasoning. As if players like Garrett grow on trees. As if you can casually upgrade from the most consistent, impactful defender in the league like it's a fantasy football trade. Fans didn't just disagree. They were stunned, and rightfully so. Because here's the reality. What Myles Garrett did during the 2024-2025 season was historic. He didn't just show flashes. He dominated wire to wire. He was a terror for offensive lines, week in and week out. He didn't disappear when the Browns were unraveling. He didn't coast through games after the season took a turn. He doubled down. He played harder. He carried them. While the organization was dealing with coaching turmoil and on-field inconsistency, Garrett stayed locked in. He didn't just lead the defense. He was a defense. He showed up every single week, no matter how broken things got around him. And he didn't just show up. He delivered elite performances with surgical consistency, which is why Lloyd's comments landed with such a hard thud. Because this isn't about a mild disagreement in team-building philosophy. This is a sports writer looking at a generational talent in his prime and suggesting the Browns blow it up anyway. It's not analysis. It's provocation. And when you look at the bigger picture, it becomes even more frustrating. Because Lloyd's take isn't happening in a vacuum. He's not new to targeting high-performing black athletes with hypercritical coverage. Shadur Sanders, another black player, another Browns prospect, has already been in Lloyd's crosshairs. Lloyd scrutinizes development, his readiness, his upside. Meanwhile, white quarterbacks like Dorian Thompson-Robinson and Dylan Gabriel, less productive, less proven, got praised, given the benefit of the doubt, called smart, called poised, even though they didn't have half the resume. The contrast was too stark to ignore. It's not just about what was said. It's about who it was said about, and how often. There's a clear imbalance in the scrutiny, a clear trend. The more decorated and dominant the black athlete, the more Lloyd seems to doubt them. The more pedestrian the white prospect, the more he seems to elevate them. People noticed. And it's not a small controversy anymore. Because when you keep pushing takes that ignore stats, sidestep logic, and undercut greatness, people stop assuming it's a coincidence. The backlash wasn't just emotional. It was grounded. Garrett's performance is backed by every metric. He wasn't just Pro Football Focus's top-edge defender. He was a tier above. His run defense, his pass rush, his snap consistency. Every number confirms what we already saw on the field. He was the best. And the suggestion that he should be traded wasn't just tone-deaf. It was delusional. No front office with any serious football IQ trades away the best edge rusher in the NFL without a replacement plan. There isn't a clear successor. There's no young star waiting in the wings. And even if there were, it wouldn't justify letting go of someone whose impact is proven and ongoing. You don't gamble with the one thing that's actually working. especially not when your team has already been drowning in instability. And it's not like Garrett is just a stat machine. He's not out here chasing personal accolades at the team's expense. He's disciplined. He's respected. He's consistent. He's the kind of player you protect at all costs because he makes your team better. On the field and in the locker room, he's a culture setter. So for Lloyd to frame Garrett as expendable, that's not just a bad take. It's disrespect. And the logic behind it was flimsy at best. Lloyd tried to present it like a long-term strategic move. Get value while you can. Build through the draft. Reboot the roster. But here's what makes that ridiculous. Garrett is a value. He is the roster piece you build around. He's not aging out production. He's not slowing down. He's ascending. You don't trade a defensive MVP caliber player to go find someone like him in the draft. That's the kind of thinking that gets general managers fired. And here's the bigger issue. When a take like this gets published, it doesn't just affect Garrett. It sends a message. That dominance isn't enough. That consistency doesn't matter. That black athletes, even when they exceed every expectation, are still one coaching change away from being deemed replaceable. That's what hit a nerve with fans, because they've seen it before. Aaron Donald has had mediocre seasons from his team, and not once has there been a real conversation about trading him. TJ Watt, same story. Those guys are protected. They're called anchors, cornerstones. No matter what happens around them, their value is never questioned. But Garrett has a better season than both, and suddenly he's a trade chip? That's not football talk. That's coded messaging. And the real shame is, Garrett hasn't given anyone a reason to doubt him. He's shown leadership, resilience, and unmatched production. He didn't just survive this season. He dominated it. He did it without drama, without excuses, without missing a beat. So what does it say when that's not enough? It says we need to ask tougher questions about how players are evaluated and who gets the benefit of the doubt when things go wrong. Because if Garrett can be treated like a throw-in, it means the standards are broken, or worse, selectively applied. This controversy didn't start because people can't handle tough conversations. It started because people are tired of the same patterns. Tired of media figures like Jason Lloyd using elite black athletes as punching bags for engagement. Tired of watching greatness get dismissed because someone wants to start a rebuild narrative. And while Garrett continues building a Hall of Fame career, Lloyd's credibility is falling apart. When your analysis stops aligning with reality, when it starts aligning more with provocation and performance, people stop listening. You become background noise. You become irrelevant. That's the real irony. Garrett will outlast the drama. His tape, his stats, his reputation, they'll hold up. He's not going anywhere. But Lloyd, he's becoming part of a larger problem. One that sports media needs to reckon with. If you're done with these empty narratives and bad faith takes, like this video, share it with someone who still thinks trading Garrett is a smart idea. And jump into the comments. Should a season like Garrett's ever spark a trade conversation? Or was this just reckless in the start? Hit that subscribe button if you're here for the truth, the breakdowns, and the chaos of sports media in real time. Because these narratives aren't going away. And neither are we. The craziest part in all of this? Jason Lloyd still hasn't backed down. Even after being hit with a tidal wave of backlash, he's held the line, doubling down on what has to be one of the most out-of-touch takes in recent NFL discourse. In his mind, trading Myles Garrett, a once-in-a-generation defensive anchor, the beating heart of the Browns' defense, and arguably the most reliable player in the building, is still somehow a smart, forward-thinking move. At this point, it doesn't feel like analysis. It feels like performance. Because there's no real-world football logic that supports the idea of letting go of Garrett, especially now. The Browns are in a precarious spot. Stefanski's gone. The front office is staring down a pivotal offseason. The quarterback position is still a looming question mark. And through it all, Garrett has been the one undeniable constant. He shows up. He dominates. He leads. The Browns aren't struggling because of Myles Garrett. They're surviving because of him. He's the rare player who changes games on his own. Offensive scheme around him. He draws double and triple teams and still wrecks plays. That 7-sack game? It's not just an anomaly. It's the kind of statement that rewrites the record books and sends quarterbacks into therapy. It's historical. It's absurd. It's exactly the kind of performance that solidifies a legacy, not one that should start trade conversations. But Jason Lloyd looked at all of that and somehow said, yeah, but maybe the Browns should move on. It's tone deaf. It's illogical. It's detached from how NFL front offices actually operate. And yet, this isn't just about one bad take. It's about why this take happened. Because it's hard to ignore the growing sentiment that Lloyd's approach to coverage has become less about actual football and more about stirring controversy. And more troublingly, selectively stirring depending on who he's talking about. This isn't a one-off moment. It's part of a pattern where elite black athletes, like Myles Garrett and Shedeur Sanders, get disproportionately criticized, their performances questioned, their futures treated as disposable. Meanwhile, less accomplished white players like Dillon Gabriel and Dorian Thompson-Robinson get hyped up with glowing evaluations and lofty potential-based projections. Let's be honest. Dorian Thompson-Robinson has flashed, sure, but he hasn't proven himself on anywhere near the level of Shedeur Sanders, let alone Myles Garrett. Dillon Gabriel? Talented, yes, but still prospect, still raw, still unproven. Yet somehow, they're framed as pieces worth building around, while Garrett is the one supposedly blocking progress. It doesn't add up, unless you stop looking at performance and start looking at bias. Because here's the reality. This kind of selective analysis is not new, and when it's consistent, it reveals something deeper. It shows whose success is believed and whose is constantly second-guessed. It shows who gets the benefit of the doubt and who gets asked to prove themselves again and again and again, even after they've already done it. And for a player like Garrett, the bar couldn't be higher. He's done everything right. He hasn't just dominated statistically. He's done it with maturity, professionalism, and focus. He hasn't been involved in off-field drama. He hasn't made excuses when the Browns lost games. He hasn't thrown coaches or teammates under the bus. He's led with quiet intensity. He's been reliable, durable, and disruptive. So why is he the one being discussed like a problem? That's the question that has people fired up, because it goes beyond football. It taps into the deeper problem in how certain players are covered by the media. When elite black athletes perform, they're athletic. When white players succeed, they're smart. When black athletes dominate, it's unsustainable. When white athletes flash potential, it's undeniable. It's not always overt. Sometimes it's just subtle enough to pass as analysis. But over time, it adds up. And when fans see it play out in real time, when they watch a journalist suggest trading a reigning Defensive Player of the Year candidate at the peak of his powers, and that same journalist goes soft on less accomplished white players, it stops being subtle. It becomes undeniable. There's a reason this take caused such a firestorm. People are tired of seeing this play out over and over. They're tired of hearing black quarterbacks called raw or not ready, while white quarterbacks with less tape and worse stats are called cerebral and high upside. They're tired of seeing players like Myles Garrett held to impossible standards, where dominating the league still gets you treated like a potential liability instead of an asset. And most of all, they're tired of media figures like Lloyd acting like their words don't reinforce these dynamics, whether they realize it or not. At a certain point, credibility matters. And when your commentary stops aligning with facts, when your targets are always the same, and when your praise always seems to land in one direction, people stop seeing you as objective. They start seeing you as part of the problem. Meanwhile, Garrett is still doing what he's always done, showing up, dominating, and letting his game speak louder than any opinion ever could. He doesn't need to respond. He doesn't need to clap back. His play on the field shuts everything down before it even starts. Because here's the bottom line. Myles Garrett is a franchise cornerstone. Full stop. He is not the problem in Cleveland. He's the reason there's still hope. He's the reason fans show up. He's the reason opposing coaches lose sleep. You don't trade a player like that. You protect a player like that. You give him resources. You surround him with talent. You give him a voice in the locker room and a permanent place in your future. You don't send him packing because your team fired a coach and you're suddenly lost. But that's where this whole thing becomes so telling. Lloyd didn't just suggest something wrong. He suggested something harmful. He suggested the Browns got the one part of their team that actually works. And he framed it like a smart, forward-thinking move. And people saw right through it. This isn't a fan base overreacting. This isn't cancel culture. This is people recognizing a pattern and saying enough is enough. Because at some point, the media needs to be held accountable for the narratives it creates. If you're going to call yourself a journalist, a reporter, an analyst, then you need to respect performance. You need to recognize greatness when it's staring you in the face. And you need to challenge your own biases, not just lean into them for clicks. Because when you don't, you end up right where Jason Lloyd is now, on the wrong side of public opinion, questioning the value of an elite player while your own credibility circles a drain. And honestly, it's not Garrett who comes out of this looking bad. He's still dominating, still leading, still writing his legacy, still on pace for Canton. But Lloyd, he's a headline, not for insight, but for getting exposed. The real kicker here, the part that's still echoing through Cleveland and the wider NFL community, is that Myles Garrett isn't going anywhere. Not because Jason Lloyd didn't try to manifest it with his take, not because Browns fans shouted him down, but because it was never a rational possibility to begin with. Garrett is untouchable. That's not hyperbole. That's the reality that everyone but Lloyd seems to understand. This man didn't just lead the league in sacks, quarterback hits, and pressures. He did it while the Browns were on fire. Not in the good way. Organizational chaos. Unstable leadership. A head coach fired. And yet, game after game, Garrett lined up, dominated, and walked away with stats that would make any defensive coordinator cry tears of joy. And the wild part? His impact goes beyond the numbers. You can't quantify the way he tilts the field. You can't track the plays that don't happen because quarterbacks panic the second they see 95 lining up. You can't box score the fear he puts in offensive schemes. So when someone like Jason Lloyd suggests the Browns should move on, should trade him while he's at his peak, you're forced to ask, what planet is this man analyzing football from? Because in this reality, you don't trade generational edge rushers in their prime. You pay them. You protect them. You build a defense around them. And if you're lucky enough to have a guy like that, you count your blessings every week. And what makes this whole thing even more disturbing is that Lloyd's argument wasn't based on Garrett failing. He didn't say Garrett underperformed. He didn't say Garrett was a locker room issue. He didn't say Garrett was aging out his prime. None of that. All he offered was a vague, baseless idea that the Browns could find better players by trading their best one. That's not analysis. That's fantasy. Because there is no better player in his position right now. Not when you factor in performance, consistency, and availability. Not when you consider the chaos he's carried this team through. You don't just get better than Myles Garrett. You build around Myles Garrett. But again, this wasn't about football logic. This was about narrative. This was about being loud instead of being right. Because if Lloyd really looked at the Pro Football Focus numbers, at the sack total, at the historic 7-sack game, at the way Garrett held the line when the season was slipping away, he would know better. But that's the problem. This wasn't Lloyd's first time taking shots at elite black athletes. It's not even his first time doing it with the Browns. His earlier criticism of Shedeur Sanders was already controversial. Sanders hadn't even taken an NFL snap, but Lloyd was already questioning his readiness, his future, his upside. Meanwhile, white quarterback prospects with nowhere near to resume or production got glowing reviews. Dorian Thompson-Robinson, Dylan Gabriel, suddenly future stars. Let's not sugarcoat it. This is why people are accusing Lloyd of a pattern, because it is a pattern. And when the criticism stops matching a performance, when high-achieving black athletes keep getting held to a different standard, you stop calling it a bad take, and you start calling it what it is, a biased one. Whether it's overt or unconscious, it has consequences. It reinforces the idea that no matter how much black athletes accomplish, they'll always be one step away from being called replaceable, disposable, tradable. But here's the part that makes this so outrageous. Garrett's not a question mark. He's not unproven. He's not erratic. He is exactly what every team in the league is desperate to find. And somehow, Jason Lloyd turned that into a liability. You can feel the disrespect in the air. Because Garrett isn't just one of the league's top defenders. He's a franchise-defining player. He's what fans show up for. He's the reason the Browns stay competitive in games they should have been out of by halftime. He's the reason opposing teams have to adjust their entire offensive scheme every week. And Lloyd suggesting he's worth a couple of picks in a project? The only people who benefit from that kind of take are content aggregators. And while Lloyd is busy fanning the flames, Garrett is over here, quiet as ever, just working. No drama, no comments, no back and forth on social media. He doesn't need a clap back. His stat line does it for him. Because let's be real, anyone else drops 7 sacks in one game, they're a walking headline for months. But Garrett, he gets trade rumors. Why? What more do you want from the guy? There's a deeper conversation that needs to happen here. Not just about Garrett, but about how the sports media landscape keeps rewarding these kind of takes. There's no accountability when a journalist repeatedly misreads the moment. There's no pause button when someone like Lloyd builds a platform off of devaluing elite performance in favor of stirring conflict. The audience knows better now. Fans have access to the stats, to the analytics, to the film. They don't need to rely on legacy voices like Lloyd to tell them who's great. They see it. And when a take goes this far off the rails, it doesn't spark debate. It erodes trust. Because what's the next step? Questioning whether Patrick Mahomes should be traded for cap space? Suggesting Justin Jefferson's too flashy and the Vikings should rebuild? Once you untether from reality, there's no bottom. There's just noise. And that's exactly what Lloyd has become. Noise. Meanwhile, Myles Garrett will continue doing what he always does. Carrying a franchise on his back, dominated without fanfare, and letting his work silence the nonsense. Because greatness doesn't need to argue. It just performs. And if Lloyd can't see that, then he's not analyzing football, he's chasing reactions. And that's not journalism. That's desperation. So yeah, the take was bad. But the fallout was necessary. It shined a light on how easily certain narratives get pushed when the subject is a black athlete. It revealed how some voices in the media aren't offering analysis. They're recycling old stereotypes in a new format. And it reminded everyone that not all criticism is created equal. And through it all, Garrett didn't flinch. He didn't need to. He knew, like everyone else watching closely, that the storm would pass. And when it did, he'd still be there, sacking quarterbacks, leading defenses, and proving every week why he's one of the most valuable players in the league. If you've had enough of media spin trying to manufacture outrage at the expense of actual talent, go ahead and like this video. Drop a comment and tell us your thoughts. Is there any logic to trading a player like Garrett, or was this just another desperate swing for attention? And don't forget to subscribe for more takedowns, breakdowns, and real talk on the messiest stories in sports media. Because when the narratives get lazy, you already know we're coming for them. Every time.